So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting today. This is the Darkinjung and the Guringai people. I'd like to acknowledge their continuing connection to land, waters, and community, and to pay my respects to their elders and their storytellers, past and present. They are the first storytellers of this country, and I would extend that warmly to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are here today. I have two brilliant authors today who need no introduction, but I'm going to run through their bios very quickly to remind you all what literary greatness and what human goodness looks like. We have Claire G. Coleman. Claire is a Wellerman Noongar woman whose ancestral country is on the south coast of Western Australia. She has written 3 works of speculative fiction to date, Terra Nullius, a novel, which was shortlisted for the Stella Prize among many other awards, The Old Lie, and Enclave. Her acclaimed non-fiction book, Lies Damned Lies, a personal exploration of the impact of colonization, was published in 2021. And today we'll be talking to Claire about her 3rd novel, Enclave, which has just been longlisted for the Miles Franklin. Inga Simpson is a novelist, a nature writer, and essayist. Her fiction, Mr. Wig, Nest, Where the Trees Were, and Willowman have been multi-awarded and listed, including for the Miles Franklin. She has also written non-fiction, understory, A Life with Trees, and a book for children called The Book of Australian Trees. Inga has 2 PhDs, because why have one when you could have 2? One in creative writing and one in literature. Today we'll be talking to her about her 5th adult fiction, The Last Woman in the World. So Claire, you have said that so much of classic speculative fiction is intentionally politically didactic. Activism deployed in Trojan horses. And Inga, you've said, as a storyteller, it's my job to imagine future possibilities. But how? I know this because I've been stalking them, by the way. You've said it's your job to imagine future possibilities, but how? Do I write eco-horror, a world even worse than the one we are rushing towards, to try to prevent it? Or an alternative fantasy future, something better to aim for? Claire's also said that every dystopia is a utopia for someone. So both your novels have been described as allegories. My first question is, what is it about the dystopia that appeals to you as a literary form or style?
Well, firstly, what's interesting about, there's a couple of interesting things about dystopias. One of the most interesting things is they can actually serve as quite a firm warning, like, this is what is coming. And if we're warned, we might stop doing it. I like to think of it like historical fiction is looking at the past to see what's gone wrong with the present, whereas speculative fiction or futuristic fiction is looking at the future. Sure, it's an imagined future, but still the future, to see what's wrong with our present and see what wrong path we're on. And I've also always been fascinated in reading dystopias. Apocalypses and dystopias, they're like my candy. I can't help reading them. They're so much fun. And I always encourage people to write what they read. So if you read dystopias, write dystopias. And you read apocalypses, write apocalypses. So I'm interested in that way. And the other thing that another thing about them I find interesting is that every dystopia is a utopia for someone, and every utopia so far historically has been a dystopia for somebody. And this Australian utopia we live in, that's, we're the wealthiest country on earth, is a dystopia for Aboriginal people. So I'm sitting from a culture that's experiencing a dystopia in a country that's considered to be a utopia. So that makes it kind of, it almost becomes the natural way of looking at this world once you look deeply into looking at this country once you look deeply into it.
Yep. And Inga?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fast forward, isn't it? We get a chance to look at the trajectory we're on, taken out maybe beyond the next decade or beyond our own generation, and see what the impacts of what we're doing now might be. And that's disconnected enough, in fiction form, that's disconnected enough from our everyday lives that we're able to look at ourselves, hopefully, a little bit more critically. I have to admit that I really love the survival aspect of these genres. You know, like one character kind of thinking they're the last person on earth, you know, having to find a way to survive. I love a character put under so much pressure like that. So that's one of the reasons that drew me to this story.
I think we both like that. I mean, every one of my novels has had a character or characters who are put under intense pressure by the horrific world they're in, and I think largely that's because the audience loves that as well. People love rooting for somebody whose cause is hopeless. That's kind of what we live for in reading fiction.
And maybe asking themselves what they would do in that situation. How would they go? You know, like alone or something. How would we go?
It brings out the prepper in all of us. So in terms of the ideas, right? So you've talked about writing what you read. Do you also write what you're afraid of and worried about? And I'd love to know where the original idea for each of your novels came from, because both ideas are so different, terrifying, and brilliant. And I want you to tell the audience a little bit about it without giving any story spoilers, partly because I want you to all go out and buy the book afterwards, but also because I really want you to go on the punishing emotional journey that I went on by reading both your novels. So the question was, the original idea, and do you also write what you're afraid of?
Well, The Last Woman in the World is a bit of an outlier in my my publishing history, and the initial idea was actually given to me. I was asked to write the book, and I was given this premise, the title, and the premise of a recluse, someone cut off from the world, so they're living alone and they don't know what's happened in the outside world, being put in a position where someone comes to their door needing help, in this case a young woman and a baby, comes to my recluse's door, and, you know, Ray has to make a decision. Do I go back out into the world and help these people, or do I stay put? And the woman who has a sick baby who's saying that everyone is dying out there. So, you know, this is a scary place to go. And the character Ray suffers from a fairly extreme form of anxiety. And so this is a pretty challenging situation for her to be placed in. So that was the premise I started with. And a few things happened while I was writing the book. The first one was the bushfires. So the book was actually due when the bushfires hit the far south coast. And so this interrupted the writing process for some time. I was evacuated a couple of times and had no power for 3 weeks, blah, blah, blah. When I went back to writing, I found that I had... What's for your next tree?
That was hilarious.
Yeah, good recovery. When I went back to writing, I found, and the fires were still going really, they went on for a long time, I found that I couldn't write about much else. You know, that was really in the front of my mind. And, you know, the book's kind of about anxiety, and on an individual level and a societal level, I think. And, you know, ironically, when I started writing the book, I was really struggling with this aspect because I had never experienced anxiety. I'd seen people have panic attacks, and I have to admit I wasn't even really that sympathetic. I'm a kind of a, well, just get on with it type person. And, of course, I found when I went back to writing this book that I was a slightly different person because I was experiencing anxiety. And, you know, I didn't sleep through the night for 9 months after the bushfires, and, you know, I could go on about that. But that was handy too, because now I could write this character. And I was struggling with the book, how it was, but once I had the bushfires in there, there was kind of another layer to the horror, if you like, that was real. So, yeah, it became a way to really get underneath what drives anxiety and the way that, say, social media can facilitate that, and that we can, and we all saw this through the pandemic as well. So this book was originally meant to come out before the pandemic, and then it was delayed.
So was this.
Yeah. It's a common story, but so then I had to keep updating, like upping the ante. So I think you mentioned before about, it's post-pandemic, but I had to keep repositioning the book so that it was after what we've all been through.
Yeah, I mean, for both those books, they could have been set any time in the present day and or near future and or past, such as sort of humans' failure and ability to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. For you, and actually, in fact, before you, did you just say someone gave you the idea, told you to write it?
Yeah, it's...
Who are you hanging out with that is telling you to write these kinds of books?
Yeah, I think this is okay to talk about. So I'm published by Hachette, so the mother company in the UK, Little Brown. It's kind of a funny story. So they wanted, someone come up with this title and this basic premise, and I think they wanted the poor person to actually walk across Australia, say from Sydney to Perth. And I said, with a baby, you've got to be kidding. And what would I write about? How would I sustain the narrative right across the continent? So they went to Hachette Australia and said, to Robert, who who was my publisher at the time, and said,
Robert has published all of us.
Yeah.
Robert's got great taste.
Yeah. A big impact. So they were saying, to Hachette, not Robert specifically, but to Hachette, we've got this idea, but we want an Australian setting. Have you got anyone, who could write about this recluse living in the middle of nowhere, close to nature, and can write the natural world? And Robert's like, I think I know someone for you. So this is, they came to me with a proposal, which is unusual. And I'd never do again, I'd have to say.
Yeah, it's like a Roger Coleman movie.
Yeah, that's interesting. Why? Okay, just before we get to your brilliant and original idea, why wouldn't you do it again? Because for the writers in the room, this is interesting, right? Where do the ideas come from? Who do they give? Where? Who gives them to you? What are we absorbing? How are we building these worlds?
Well, it was kind of a collaborative process, or it was meant to be. And I found out I'm not a team player when it comes to writing. I want absolute control. And there were a couple of suggestions that, and this is UK too, so remember that they don't really get the Australian landscapes, that there's more than one, and it's not all dusty. So yeah, there were some pretty crazy suggestions. There are these beings in the book that are kind of different for everyone, and that the publisher wanted them to be more visualised, more definite. And could they be little fire people running around?
I'm so glad you said no.
And I thought that was pretty poor taste, given,
yes.
2/3 of the country had just burned. So, yeah, I just want control, and to change my mind and, absolute control.
Brilliant. Love it. Okay, Claire, go.
I want to make Neil Gaiman's joke. Neil Gaiman, the writer, is always asked where to get your ideas. He said, I go down the road to the idea shop. Because everyone wants an easy solution. I want to write a book. I need an idea. Well, ideas are more nebulous than that. Sometimes they start with the tiniest little pinprick of something that you inflate in your mind as something huge. And for me, it was a Liberal Party politician, I can't remember even which one, whining about having to associate with people who are not of his type. Don't want to be near gays and people of colour and this whole idea of this. I thought there's people out there who don't want to be anywhere near people like me, Aboriginal and queer. Like no one wants to be. There's certain people who would never associate with any of the three of us on this stage, and I thought if those people got what they wanted, had their own little place where they could just be their own little arsehole selves, what would that place be like? And I wrote that book. Essentially, and that's where Enclave came from. It's just like those assholes who won't have anything to do with us. If you think about this idea of getting a society where everyone is the same, all middle class or middle class or wealthier, all white, and all straight, and as you think about all the things that people who are not from those cultures bring to society, all the stuff they get from everyone else, the place that they're in would be extremely boring. And that's kind of the dystopia I was writing.
A nightmare.
Was it? Yeah, who'd want to live there? I wouldn't want to live there. It's like that saying, it's like, I wouldn't want to be part of a club that would want me as a member. Well, that's not really me. I wouldn't want to live in a place that doesn't want people like me living there. Yes. They don't want me there, but I don't want to be there either, because that means there's no one else like me there, and that means there's only people like them, and who wants that? So that's where the idea came from.
Yeah, brilliant. And it goes to that thing that you were talking about earlier, where somebody's utopia is somebody else's dystopia.
And absolutely. And that's the thing. If all the rich, middle class, white people all had their own little perfect utopia, with no one who's not like them, that would be, to me, that's the sort of place that would send my blood cold. I would absolutely hate it. And so therefore that's their utopia is my dystopia. It's an exact example of that sort of idea.
Yeah, and your dystopia though, well rather their dystopia, is in fact more utopic than dystopic, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And which was fascinating. I just thought that bit when you, and I'm not going to story spoil it for you, but it was really interesting, the contrast of the world inside the Enclave and the world outside the Enclave.
And some people don't. I'm not going to spoil either. But some people don't get this extreme dichotomy I've built between these two societies. That extreme dichotomy is kind of the point of the story. Without the extremity of that dichotomy, the story doesn't work. And I've had that in every novel I've written. There is always somebody who says, I don't get this about it. It would have been better without that thing. And I go, well, you obviously didn't understand it. Otherwise, you would have known why I did that. You know, and it happens to everyone, I think.
Yeah, and also they are themselves obviously not writing dystopic fiction, because that's part of the genre.
Yes.
Okay, I've got loads of questions because I really like you too. So in this novel, you explore some really big themes. Okay, some terrifying themes, some of the most troubling features of our troubled world. So we've got bigotry, transphobia, climate change, fire, pandemics, old news, surveillance, AI, algorithms. Keeps going. How and why, for both of you, right, there's so many catastrophic themes to choose from, how and why the ones that you've focused on? And when you sit down, given what Claire was talking about with the sort of didactic nature of apocalyptic fiction, you've chosen certain themes. You could have chosen any of them, and you've chosen certain ones. Was there something that you were trying to say when you sat down to write the novel? Or did the writing process itself reveal to you what you wanted to say?
Yeah, I mean, for me, probably my number one concern is, the threat to our natural environments. And so given that's the natural environment is usually at the heart of all my work, even this one, it's hard for me not to write about that. And given I'd been caught up in an apocalypse of sorts, I mean, it really was laughable from the outside, not from the inside at the time, but, people are like, oh, how did you think of all this? How did you make it all up? And it's like, well, I was living in it. I was living in an apocalypse. So, in a sense, I didn't have much control. Like, the fire scenes in this are very raw. I had kind of hoped the editor would push back a bit on those, but maybe they were, worried that there was sensitive ground. But, yeah, they're pretty raw, things that happened to me or people I know. And I don't know that I had that much control over what I was writing. I mean, in hindsight, it's quite an angry book, that the fires, that this is happening, that we let it happen. I did things like go out into all the forests that were most badly burned and photograph them, and even if the national park was still closed or the track was closed, I would go out there anyway. I was pretty masochistic about it. And I don't know what I was trying to do to myself or the point that I wanted to get to, but yeah, all of that is in the book, this kind of rage that we let this happen. Yeah.
And I think even when I'm reading it, without it being a call to arms or a call to action, it is, right? The beauty and the tragedy of it is so profound that you can't not be motivated to action when you read your book.
I hope so. I mean, the point that I came to myself, which I think is in the book, it probably came in the final draft, but, there's still, there are forests that I walked since I was a child that are they're not gone, but, parts of them are gone. The rainforest gullies are gone, or big old growth forests are gone. And, it was really a process of accepting this, and that, I'm in my 50s, I'm never going to see them grow back. Some of those forests may recover if they have the chance, and there's been a lot more rain than we could have anticipated, so a lot of forests are recovering. But I'm never going to see those forests again, like those same forests, and if forests come to replace them, I'm not going to be around to see them either. So there's a lot of grief there and a process of acceptance, but the point that I got to was, by the end of the writing process, was that there's still so much to fight for. I mean, look out the window. It's easy to just go, oh, well, it's ruined, or it's not pristine forest anymore. There's, so much wildlife and beautiful landscapes, wild landscapes worth fighting for. So that's what keeps me going, and that's what keeps humans going, always.
Well, I was in my last panel, just at the other surf club, I was talking about this concept of hopeful pessimism, which is waking up every morning going, yep, the world's going to get worse, but I fucking hope I'm wrong. And that's my attitude. That's what I write. That's the attitude I write. It's like the world's getting worse every day. That's the pessimism bit. But the hope is maybe we're wrong and the world won't continue to get worse. And it's that hope, that little spark of hope that keeps the fight going. If we believe the world is going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, what's the point of resisting these negative changes that are happening to us? So we're better off. But if we think everything's going to be okay, we don't fight either. So what we do, we have to know the world's going to get worse and fight against it.
Yeah, and you've still got to sustain yourself, We've still got to sustain ourselves and our families and our loved ones. And for me, that's through the natural world. And so it's a careful line to tread where I'm getting my sustenance, but also trying to make a difference.
Yeah, so there's hopeful pessimism, is that what we're calling it? Hopeful pessimism, and I think also for both of you, if I may, I think in your work there's activism. And so I wanted to ask you, well, I'm going to quote you again, because I really did stalk you both. Claire, you have said, I must do what I can to change how this country sees itself. And Inga, you've said, when I write the future, I wish I could paint a pretty picture. I wish I could write that it didn't happen on my watch, rather than that we watched it happen. So my question to you is, do you as writers and as authors think that you have a job? And do you think you have a duty?
I can't speak for any other author. I certainly can't speak for Inga here or for you. But to me, writing is a... Actually, this came up in the last panel. I'll say exactly the same as the word I said then. Writing is a way to be an activist without the cops hitting him on the head. And that's, I mean, I'm nearly 50, and I'm not going to be marching on the street as much as I used to. But if I can write and if I can make people see a different world to what they can see, there's kind of... in a way, we create the world we live in, and that where we see things, it's filtered through our own expectations and our own perceptions. So to teach people that their perceptions are different, so that after engaging with your work, their perceptions change just a little bit, so they see a bit more clearly what the world really is, then you can. Then that's a form of activism. It's a form of you don't have to even be directly didactic. Yes, I am quite a didactic writer. I admit it, and that's a criticism people have of me. I'll accept that, but not as a criticism. I accept that as a fact. I'm a didactic writer, but I think part of it is writing. Literature is extremely good at teaching people to see the world different to how they've seen it. That's what it is very good at, and I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to make people not see what the Australia they expect to see, this utopia, non-racist places, which everyone says, whatever expects it is, where terra nullius, people still see terra nullius. I want people to not see any of that. I want people to wake up and see what Australia is, which is one of the top 10 wealthiest countries on earth per capita, yet where there's people homeless in the streets. country where you consider yourselves as a country to not be racist, and yet Aboriginal people, the Australian government is being dragged by the UN every year for over Indigenous rights. A country where people think that there's not much, where it's like country of the fair, go everyone gets a good chance, yet they had the Cronulla riots. So I want people to kind of see, I don't want people to see the nice, pretty Australia that everyone's seeing. I want people to see the Aboriginal disadvantage, the Cronulla riots, the climate disaster, and the fact that despite Australia's wealth, the deep gap between rich and poor is so great that there are homeless people in the streets of every capital city.
Yeah, absolutely. The beauty of a novel is it allows us to engage our imaginations and enter another world or another character's point of view, and all the crises that Claire's just described are crises of imagination, a lack of imagination in understanding the consequences of our actions, or inability to see ourselves clearly. And a novel and following the narrative arc of the characters in the novel, I don't know, for some reason, it's storytelling, isn't it? It just sweeps us up and helps us see differently. I absolutely do see it as my job now, and I talked about the impact of the bushfires on me and the kind of process I went through after that. It was a very dark time, and the kind of bargain I made with myself, if you like, was, well, no, I need to keep going, but I'm going to write about this. This is my gift. I can see and feel this so intensely. Yeah, it's my job to write about it and hopefully capture some readers' imaginations with that.
I think writing talent, if there's such a thing, maybe ability, the skills to be a writer, comes with it a fairly high amount of responsibility, because we are nothing but the stories we see around us. Everything we believe is a story, right? And writers have the ability to change those stories. So that if we use our powers for evil, we can do more evil than almost anyone else. So I think we are responsible, and it's probably a good thing that genuinely evil writers aren't very good at it, so their stories don't tend to dominate. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that for the most part you meet a good writer, and generally they are centrist to left-leaning, and therefore want to make the world a better place. Because that's what left-leaning means, wanting to make the world a better place for everybody.
Yeah, okay. So much there. I feel like quoting Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility, and you two exercise your power and responsibility very well. Thank you for what you write and how you write it. I want to talk briefly about hopefulness. Hang on, have we got time? Yes, we've got time. Hopefulness, and then your characters, because you were talking about your characters there, and I'm going to pick up on that in a second. So both novels end with hope. They do. And that was a relief, can I just say. Was this a choice? Did it happen deliberately or organically? And at any time in the writing, again, another writer's question, did you want it to, or think it might end differently?
With Enclave, I decided it'd be really nice to have some hope at the end. I mean, with the Old Lie, which was my second novel, I built up. It won't be a spoiler to say that I built up all this hope and then snatched it away at the end, which is a really mean thing to do. Terra Nullius has a little bit of hope, but not a whole lot. And I thought it'd be nice to write a book with. I actually said to someone, "I'm going to do something weird. I'm going to write a book with a happy ending," because it is odd to write dystopic speculative fiction with a happy ending. It's actually an odd thing to do. People don't actually do it. If you think about the great spec fic, it's either a neutral ending. Things have gone from bleak or it's incredibly bleak at the end. And I decided to write a hopeful ending. Maybe because I needed hope myself, and I never had an idea of. I tend to know only three things when I start writing a book: the beginning, like where the characters are at the start of the story, something pivotal in the middle that changes everything, like kind of what they call the. I can't remember what they call. I'm not a trained writer, so I don't remember. I don't know the terms for anything, but I'll know something in the middle that's really important to the characters, and I know how it ends. And those three things don't change. Everything else changes, but those three factors never change, because I think you need to have those three things built into the story firmly for the whole. You got to have, without those three kind of pillars of the tripod, the story does not work. And doesn't matter how much of a shambles you are around them, as long as those three things work, it doesn't. Everything else can just be a complete mess, and you'll still make it work. So, and normally the middle of a story is the first thing I think of, not the end. But the end is firm, very firm.
Yeah, I tend to write the endings quite early on. So I'll start, and then I might, think of some key scenes in the middle, where things tend to pivot. We love that word now, right? Pivot. Used to be a perfectly ordinary word. And then I'll write the ending, like the actual ending scene. I'll write that early on, because it stops me rushing towards it. I know people who sometimes read the last scene of a book and then go back, and I'm not one of those, but with the writing I do it that way. I don't think I changed the last scene much, so I kind of knew where the character would get to, and it probably is one of the more emotional scenes in the book, so I suppose it mirrors some of my own process through that time, but it just came pretty naturally, and I didn't have to change it much. It seemed to work. Yeah.
It seemed to work. Yeah, it really worked.
Okay, good.
I think if you don't have a firm idea of what the ending is before you start writing, there's too much of an kind of automatic temptation to water down the ending.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you're planning for if you know that for your story to work properly, someone has to die. It's too easy to not kill them when you feel sorry for them later. I think, you have to know what you're going to do. How every character is going to die before you finish a book.
And it sort of creates problems. So I know they start here, and I know they end there, and I know this happens in the middle, but the rest. So it's that work where your mind. This is how I see it anyway, that my subconscious gets to work. I've set the tripod up, as Claire puts it, I think is great. And then my mind is working away, even when I'm sleeping. It's great. And trying to bridge the gaps. How do I solve that problem? Well, because she's in the shitter here. So how does she get to that ending? Yeah. So they say that if you create a problem, you've got to solve. That's where the real good creative juice comes from.
So interesting that you're willing to commit, you've sort of identified the ending, you're going to commit to it, and then you're finding your way there, whichever way you get there, but you're not letting yourselves chicken out.
I think it's more common than people think. I think the most famous version of this is J.K. Rowling, who's a terrible person, but she had a good story, I suppose. But she said that the ending of Harry Potter was always firm. The ending of the entire arc of the whole lot was firm from the beginning. 7 books, but she always knew what the ending was going to be. So I think that's a good example. She's not a good writer or a good person, but that
wasn't a good ending either. Come on.
All right, we're going to talk characters, then we're going to talk process if we have time, and then we're going to do 10 minutes. Sorry, guys. Sorry.
So we're all wrecking the joint today.
Yeah. And then we're going to do 10 minutes of questions. So characters, okay? So I loved both your protagonists so much. And they both go on a really enthralling journey of asserting agency, finding courage to break free from the chains that hold them back, whether it's anxiety or this authoritarian world that they live in. And they assert they go for what they want and what they need. And they evolve from victim to hero. And they find a way to either build their own world or to make their way in the world that they have to live in. So, how did these characters come to you? Were they created and constructed deliberately to serve a purpose? Or were they characters that just kept surfacing, kept knocking on your door? Or are they a version of you? Please explain.
I think any author who denies that every character is a version of themselves is lying. Mm-hmm. I think every character, every author writes has a lot of the author in them, and that's just a fact of writing. But in this case, the protagonist of Enclave is probably the least like me of any protagonist I've written. But I thought it was actually... come up with my protagonists and all my other characters based on, not on who they are, but how their personality, their social status, whatever, makes the story work. I don't know about everyone else here, but I'm a story first writer. I've got the story. I know what the story wants to do, and then I dump the characters in the story. But I don't give a shit about setting at the beginning. I think story first, then characters, then setting, and that kind of works. But for me, the story has to work, so the characters have to be created to make the story work. And I'm not afraid to add another character. I mean, I've written two of my 3 novels have been multi-voice, like multi-protagonist novels, and in both of them, I have gone back and inserted a character that wasn't there before, and put them as a protagonist character, and had to rewrite the whole book to make it work because I needed that character later. Yeah. So I think it's my character is just chosen by looking at a kind of subconscious formula. What does this character need to be like to make the story travel through?
Yeah, so your character then isn't necessarily driving the story. The story's driving the story, and your character's making your story work.
Yeah, the character's there to make it work.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. You, Inga?
Probably the other way around. I'm place first, so the setting, then the character who has to be connected to that place, and then the story slowly starts coming. I have to really drag the plot out of myself a lot of the time. Ray, well, a close friend of mine said this, so it's probably true, that Ray's voice is closest to my own of all my books, so that's revealing. I knew this character had to suffer from anxiety, which, I knew nothing about until I wrote the book. But it was really her art form. She's a glassmaker, and she's quite big and strong and tall, which obviously I'm not. But yeah, her artistic kind of practice defines her a lot. So that was, that took the character away from me. But just her, I guess what I gave her that I have is this comfort in the natural world and a close relationship with the natural world, and then the kind of trauma that comes with that, the anxiety that comes with that, given the state of the planet. I don't know how well I'm answering that question, but
yeah, really well.
Yeah, it's partly a product of her. She evolved throughout the course of the novel, and the title. She isn't the last woman in the world, but she's the last woman in the world that you would expect to be any use at all in a crisis. And it turns out she's quite useful.
She's awesome.
Quite capable.
I'm using someone pointed out to me once, and they're kind of right, that if you get the 2 main characters from Enclave and mush them together, it's a lot like me. But individually, they're nothing like me. But if you smush them together, then you've got someone a lot like me.
Yeah, okay. And then we've got Ray with your voice, closest to your voice out of
Yeah, that's
all
what
of
they said.
Yeah, interesting. Not that anyone's asking me, but it may interest you to know that my next character is an assassin.
Watch out.
Is that not like you?
Yeah, maybe. So I do want to I want to talk about their arc before we do process. Because they go on a fascinating arc. They go from being afraid and trapped or unaware, but sensing that something is awry with their world, to really extraordinary amounts of agency and independence and willingness to fight the things they're most terrified of. Okay? So, why was it hard to write? How important was it to you that they were able to do this for themselves, or that you were able to do it for them? It was wonderful to observe as a reader.
Yeah, you want that strong narrative arc is really satisfying, isn't it? To see a character, or character arc, isn't it? To see a character find out what they're capable of under pressure is something very satisfying about that, and it was satisfying to write too. And given the book was about fear, Ray basically has to overcome her fears, and it's tricky, not wanting to give away too much about the plot, but that's key. Fear is key to unlocking the threats that they face, and it's true of all of us, isn't it? To achieve what we want to achieve or be the best versions of ourselves, we have to overcome our fears, sometimes our worst fears, to be the best that we can be. So yeah, it was it's kind of satisfying to write.
It was great to read.
I think the job of a protagonist is to evolve inside the story. So if your protagonist starts off a bit of a coward, or a bit scared, or a bit unaware, it's their job to get better at surviving the world they're in. If your character's a bit of an arsehole, it's their job to become nicer. So if a character, and they say it's one of those kill your darling things. If a character's not doing their job, which is evolving in the story, then get rid of them, start again. And that's really because let's face it, the thing people are most unaware about literature is books exist to be read. If you write a book and people don't read it, it's like a tree falling in the forest and no one there to hear it. It's like, if a book is never read, it may as well not be a book. So you want your books to be read, and that's the point of them. So therefore you have to make a compelling story. That's our job as writers.
So on that, can I ask you, this will nicely segue into process. See how I did that? When you are writing, you talk about writing a compelling story, are you actively and consciously thinking about your reader, about your publisher, the market, the gateway, what makes it compelling?
I absolutely always think about my audience, constantly. And if anyone in the audience has read Terra Nullius, you know precisely what I mean by that. I am always, every line of writing I write, I am thinking, how is this? Not I'm thinking, what have I written? I'm thinking, how is this going to be read? Always. And that's what I don't really think about what the publishers are going to want.
Well, that's because they're all beating down your door, girlfriend. So...
I think I like to have my first draft just for me. I think that's why I didn't enjoy this process as much. The first draft is just for me. I'm just playing. That's kind of a little trick I play with myself that, just playing. I'm not showing anyone yet. I can still change my mind about everything. And I don't think of anyone. I just let it as much come from the subconscious. And, they say if there's some weird little aspect, we'll make it weirder, drag it out to its farthest point, So I'm just trying to do that and not overthink things and not worry about the publisher saying, oh, isn't it a bit bleak? It's like, look around. But then the next draft, so I'll put that draft down and then, leave it for a while, pick it up again and kind of read it and make some notes, make a map of it almost. Then I'm thinking about the reader because I've got to somehow, there's a story there and some of it might be a surprise to me when I read it back. You're like, oh, it's about that. Shit. Okay. It needs more work, but I have to start to think about what order things need to come in and how I best can present this story for the reader, to make it an enjoyable one.
That can be the funnest bit when you reach a bit and go, well my favourite bits are either when you reach a bit and go, oh, that's a layer of knowledge I didn't mean to put in there, how awesome. Or when you read it back and go, what, I wrote that?
So when you read it and go, God, I really am brilliant. Okay.
I actually had that with Liza and Liza. Someone asked me to reference something and I looked at it and went, what? Who wrote that?
All right, so we're going further into process now, if that's okay? Yep? Unless you want to stay on the end of the world. We're okay to go to process? So, do you have a sense of your, and I don't mean this narcissistically, but do you have a sense of your body of work that you are producing and where you want it to go in the future? Do you think this is who I am and what I want to be producing and leaving behind as an author?
Yeah.
Nice. Hey, next.
I know it's hard. It is kind of a private thing, isn't it? Willow Man, which is kind of about cricket bat making and cricket, is an outlier in my work as well. Even in that cricket novel, I brought in an environmental thread, believe it or not. But yeah, all of my work is environmental. I can't imagine that changing. I can't kind of help that. And I'm just, in the way that I live my life, I'm kind of going deeper and deeper I'm trying in my life and in my writing to get closer and closer to the natural world, to being a part of it, not outside it, to more of my life being a part of it. So I guess that's taking me down a particular rabbit hole in my work, thinking about other beings, not as it, but as they, them, another being. These are the areas I'm interested in working. Our senses, all the senses that we have that we're not using, as humans, not using or not as aware of, these are the interests I'm following. So, I can sort of have ideas for a few more books, and I can see, I'll just follow those leads where they take me.
Excellent. I'm super relieved. Okay. Claire?
I discovered at some point that if you consider where my skills lie and where my ability to cope with the outside world lies, I'm really only suited to one job. And that's the job I'm doing. So not only is writing the only thing I think I'm capable of, it's actually only been the only career I've held on to for any significant length of time. And it's not only is there that aspect, but I think that I don't think it's arrogant to think that everyone deep down wants to leave some sort of legacy. And people have different ways of leaving a legacy in the world. Most people want to make the world a better place. I think we all want to make the world a better place. For me, that legacy, that way of making the world better, is to write books or to write, and that's the only way I've got. So the only way I've got to, the only tool I have to leave the world better than I found it when I was born is to write books that change people. Because the way to change the world is change people, and then they change the world. Because if we all want to change the world changes. So if you can change people, the world changes.
Look, on that note, I am going to stop, and I promised I would share these guys with you. So if you had like to ask them questions and interrupt me, you are welcome to do that. Do we have questions from the floor?
I've got one microphone here. Put your hand up. One sentence question. That was amazing. Come on.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy.
We're not as scary as we pretend to be.
I've actually got another 10 questions on process, but don't be shy.
The only stupid question is when you didn't ask, well, we're up here.
So I'm going to ask you both. If you were not a writer, what would you be?
A photographer, a nature photographer.
I mean, I can't really answer that question because I've been many things in the last 49 years, and I've been bad at most of them. So probably if I wasn't a writer, I'd probably be, the only thing I'd be able to do is talk too much, as in do even more speaking.
Radio. What about radio?
Radio, something like that. Yeah, that's the only thing I'm
Talk
good
back
at.
radio.
Yeah, well, I could do that. I'm good at writing books and talking crap. That's really.
It's a good thing you don't talk crap in your books. Questions? Yay! Go, Dina, go.
I just wanted to ask, is there anything, I guess, through your body of work, having written a number of books, each of you, is there anything you do feel hopeful about at all? Because you do focus on the bleak. Is there anything that you can think about that in the last few years, okay, that's something I can point to that I'm hopeful about?
I want to be hopeful. I want to be hopeful that as a society within this colony called Australia, people are beginning to learn about the treatment of Aboriginal people and that Indigenous rights will improve. I would like to hope that, and I kind of do hope that. But also, I'm a bit scared because around the world, the world seems to cycle towards fascism, and we're going through another cycle now. One of the hopes is that we can actually stop this wave of fascism before it rises. But I do hope that people's belief in human rights and the equality of all humans will continue to increase.
Yeah, I think having gone through the marriage equality debate, which I'm reminded of at the moment, of course, with all the sort of airing in the social media of everyone's strong opinions, that was so awful leading up to it. But then once it was done, and things seemed to change really quickly. The language everyone's using, that our leaders are using, seemed to change quickly. So I do feel hopeful that we're at least going in the right direction, though it's pretty awful being in the middle of it, I imagine. And environmentally, that's harder. But I how to tell this story succinctly. 2 little ones. So where I live on the far south coast is a marine park around me now. So when I was a kid, and I spearfished there as well. So everything got pretty depleted. And then it was made a marine park, which there is talk of repealing at the moment. But yeah, 10, 15, 20 years as a marine park. And when you dive there now, without a spear gun, the abundance of life is miraculous. It's amazing. So even 10 years, when I put my head under the water, I kind of squealed because there was so many fish. So nature can recover. And I have a block of land my family had. We had a family farm and sold most of it, kept a little bit of it. And, I have ideas about regenerating that bit of land. It's where I camped as a kid. It's pretty rocky, densely treed. Just having the stock off it, not farming it for 12 months, and it happened to rain a lot. I had ideas about planting hundreds of trees. I don't really need to. They're planting themselves. So to see, just when we can pull back and stop interfering, what the power of nature to recover itself, we might wipe ourselves out, and the planet will be better off. So that gives me a kind of slightly off-kilter optimism.
David Suzuki said, someone asked him once, do you think we're really capable of destroying all life on Earth? And he said, no, we're not. We're capable of wiping out all the humans, but life will recover. But we will die. We're rendering this planet uninhabitable for our own species. We're not going to wipe out all life on it.
Thanks for that note of hope. More questions?
Oh, I have a question for Claire. I think it's, I don't know, you've excited me in that you have so many jobs that you're so terrible at. And I'm just wondering if any of these experiences in these jobs have ended up in your books.
A lot of them do, yeah. My main tertiary education slips into Enclave quite a lot, which is, you're going to think this is really odd, but I have an honours degree in the mathematics of machine learning. So it's odd. You don't go from that to novelist very often, but that's where my education is. And I kind of timed it wrong, and I finished my honours at the crash of the .com boom. So I was like, whatever, it's not going to happen now. But I could have gotten to the AI boom, but I think AI is incredibly immoral, so I'm not going to. So that slips into Enclave, mostly as a cautionary tale. But I mean, I've been a cook as well, and I don't think any of my characters have been cooks. But so I've done many things. I've been many people. One thing that does slip into all my novels is homelessness, because I've also been homeless, and someone pointed out to me that homelessness always sneaks into everything I write, and I think it's because it is such had such a strong impact on my life, as it does everyone, that it's hard to imagine writing without homelessness. And one thing that I've noticed a major impact of homelessness is I've never been free of the fear of ending up homeless again, and I haven't been homeless for quite a while now. So, yeah, that always slips in, and that is of my lives. That is the biggest life that slipped in.
If there are no further questions, then I'm just going to ask. Are there any more questions that we can see?
No, apparently not.
Okay, then I'm going to ask them just for 30 seconds on what you're writing next, and then I think you're both there, Inga and Claire will go sign books at the back.
Yes,
Is that right? You'll do
so
an
thank
announcement
you
about
for that. So we've got all the books are at the back, including yours. So please go and have a look, and there's book signing.
And just before you answer what you're writing next, when you are going to buy books, just remember that you've got lots of friends and family that's birthdays, Christmases, Mother's Day, Father's Day. Just bulk
Shameless.
buy. Do yourself a favour, bulk buy those 2 books.
And my books are perfect for racist uncles.
Excellent. Love it. Okay, what's next?
I'm writing another thriller, and all my own ideas, and it's called The Thinning. It's kind of about extinction or the loss of abundance and the impacts that has on us, on humanity, on our imaginations. Yeah, another light topic.
I am early stages on several things because I had too many things that I wanted to do, and I tried to do them all at once. So, but I'm writing. I've started on another novel, which I'm not sure where it's going to go yet. I know what I want to say, but I don't know how it's going to work. I have funding from the Australia Council to write a book on visual art because I'm also an art writer on my spare time. There's no such thing, and I'm adapting War of the Worlds for a theatre company, which is War of the Worlds on stage, which is a crazy idea. It's so much fun.
So good. All right, that sounds awesome. Thank you both. I'm excited about both your projects. This has been, for me, an absolute pleasure and honour. Thank you. It was powerful.
Thank you.
It was terrifying and depressing and uplifting all at the same time. So thank you, and a round of applause. Thank you.